In the case of this particular individual, she was expelled from Rebel Media, and she has a pretty clear track record of racist, anti-Semitic, and white supremacist messaging. I don't think it takes a lot to figure out that you shouldn't be sharing a stage with that kind of individual. And it's really unfortunate that in this day and age, the leader of the official opposition did not find it a problem to share a stage with such an individual. This is real, folks, and it has real consequences, and hate speech may be academic for some people, but it has real consequences.
Global censorship is here. This is something I've seen coming inch by inch, year by year, but the end wasn't yet in sight. Not until recently. In Europe, Article 11 and 13 make social media managers responsible for the content hosted on their platforms, making monitoring of all content a necessity. In the UK, more than anywhere else, we've seen the rise of the Twitter police and arrests made for things said on social media. The recent anti-porn laws further strengthen the government's controls over the internet and its providers. In the wake of the Christchurch shootings, New Zealand and Australia have been busy instituting new laws and regulations, going so far as to actually pass legislation which could imprison social media executives if a terrorist attack were broadcast on their platform, such as with Christchurch. Everywhere, we're seeing not just laws and the impetus for social media censorship, but the systems and tools of control being put in place. Global censorship is here. This was just published to the Globe and Mail. Facebook bans several Canadians for supporting white nationalism as Ottawa eyes new regulations for social media platforms. The laws of control are coming here next. Facebook has banned several Canadian far-right commentators and extremist groups for promoting organized hate, a move that comes as legislators in Canada and Europe look at tightening regulations on social media platforms. 6 months ahead of the federal election, that's some convenient timing, the social media giant said on Monday it had banned several users for supporting white nationalism, including Faith Goldy, a former Toronto mayoral candidate who was fired in 2017 from Rebel Media after appearing on a podcast affiliated with a neo-Nazi website.
Yeah, so the announcement that we made on January 30th, we clarified or illustrated that there were kind of 3 values that we were hoping that social media platforms would work with us on with regards to integrity, authenticity, and transparency on their platforms. And we have had several discussions with all of the platforms to varying degrees of success, I would say, in terms of how they plan to protect Canadians and our electoral process in the upcoming election. And we have not really seen that much progress with them. I think that the platforms feel that this is something that they should be doing on their own, and I don't have the confidence that they are disclosing everything with us. And I think that, you know, from experiences that we've seen around the world, that there's a lot left to be desired in terms of how seriously they're taking these issues. You know, we continue to engage with them and continue to have conversations, but, you know, I'm not feeling great about where we are right now.
Earlier in the day, Democratic Institutions Minister Karina Gould warned that social media companies are not doing enough to protect Canadian democracy ahead of October's federal election and could face new regulations. That's right, allowing free speech by Canadians is not protecting democracy. No, in fact, you need to silence them, and that's protecting a democracy these days. I think there is a conversation we've been having with social media platforms to say that this is something you could do on your own, but in the absence of you doing it on your own, then we need to look at other mechanisms, she told reporters. That's state control over those private companies that we keep hearing that can do whatever they want. British lawmakers introduced new proposals on Monday to set up a social media watchdog that could fine executives and ban companies, while a European Union parliamentary committee approved a measure that would give web companies an hour to remove terrorism-related materials or face steep fines. I mean, at least they're not throwing people in prison. In Canada, Facebook said it had banned the account for violating its policies against dangerous individuals and groups, which includes people who have been convicted of a hate crime, advocated violence towards identifiable groups such as visible or religious minorities, or organized an event with known hate groups. The social media firm wouldn't specify what triggered the ban or what rules were broken, saying the company didn't want to give people ways to game the system. That's right, they don't want to have to explain themselves or give you a set of guidelines to follow, because then they might actually have to take some responsibility for their actions. However, it said the accounts had been under review for some time in consultation with a Canadian expert on far-right groups. Those banned did not receive a warning from Facebook, and the company said they cannot appeal the decisions. Individuals and organizations who spread hate, attack, or call for the exclusion on others on the basis of who they are have no place in our services, the social media firm said in a statement. Canadian officials applauded the move. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan tweeted, "Facebook's decision to ban white nationalist groups and those who support them is a good step in cracking down on extremism online. But there is more to be done." Perhaps the defense minister has some personal motivations after the Twitter harassment he received when he took credit for an offensive in Afghanistan more than 10 years ago. Minister Sajjan, your planning of Operation Overlord and the D-Day landings was inspiring. The attack on the Death Star wouldn't have been possible without the retrieval of the station's blueprints by Minister Sajjan. At the Battle of Thermopylae, Harjit Sajjan led 300 Spartans against the Persians. Thanks to Harjit Sajjan's foresight and musket skills, Canada was able to defend against the Americans in the War of 1812. This kind of hateful rhetoric cannot be tolerated in a democracy. Immigration Minister Ahmed Hussein told a news conference, "The government is glad Facebook took action. We've seen hate speech fuel the attack against Pittsburgh at the synagogue. We've seen more recently in Christchurch worshippers gunned down. This is real and it has consequences." Ms. Gould pointed to the new British proposal that would give lawmakers broad new powers to regulate the internet to stop hate speech and extremist content. The proposal, contained in a white paper supported by Prime Minister Theresa May, who can't pass Brexit but can pass hate speech bills, called for a regulator who could issue fines, shut down websites, and make executives of social media firms personally liable for dangerous content on their platforms.
And then on the 26th of February 2019, Facebook and Instagram decided to remove Tommy Robinson's pages. This is particularly significant because Facebook was his largest platform, with over 1 million followers on his page, which made Tommy Robinson's Facebook presence larger than every major political party in the United Kingdom combined.
We are having active conversations with our partners and allies around the world as to what this would look like in the Canadian context, she said. Others banned by Facebook on Monday include white nationalist Kevin Gaudreau of Peterborough, Ontario, the Canadian Nationalist Front, Aryan Strike Force, Wolves of Odin, and Soldiers of Odin, also known as Canadian Infidels. The last time I saw the Soldiers of Odin, they were protesting a pedophile's house who was released to the public. Can't have those anti-pedophile hate groups. Facebook routinely bans accounts for violating its policies. That's actually true. It didn't make the news and nobody heard about it, but I have seen Facebook ban black radical groups of 300,000 people. Last year, it banned far-right group the Proud Boys and its founder, media commentator Gavin McInnes, for violating its hate speech policies. It also announced a ban on several white nationalist groups in Australia in March. Until last month, Facebook had made a distinction between white supremacy, which it said should be banned because it promoted the view that some races were superior to others, and white nationalism, which it considered ethnic pride and should be allowed because it was on the same level as Zionism in Israel or Basque separatism in Spain. But the noose is tightening. But weeks after a gunman killed 50 people in 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, and live-streamed the shootings on Facebook, the Silicon Valley firm said it would expand its hate speech policies to include white nationalism. Since the attacks, the company has become more aggressive about naming those it bans. Facebook and Google are set to testify before a U.S. congressional committee on Tuesday on their efforts to stop the spread of white nationalism and hate speech on the internet. So if you thought the First Amendment was going to protect you, well, it's coming home.
Mark Zuckerberg wants more rules and regulation for the internet. The billionaire CEO of Facebook, who has been under scrutiny over the role his company plays in spreading misinformation, wrote an op-ed this morning calling on regulators to step up and establish a rule book. Writing, I'm quoting now, "I believe we need a more active role for governments and regulators. By updating the rules for the internet, we can preserve what's best about it, the freedom for people to express themselves and for entrepreneurs to build new things while also protecting society from broader harms."
Canadian anti-hate groups cheered the move by Facebook and Instagram, which they say have become the most widely used platforms by white nationalists. Really? Instagram and Facebook? Okay. To spread their views and recruit followers. This is a really huge step, said Bernie Farber, chairman of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, a group that has been pressing social media companies to address the spread of white nationalist content. Mr. Farber said he was surprised when Facebook appeared to respond to his group's complaint about Miss Goldy and others. That's because nobody cares what this Mr. Farber says, and Faith Goldy has tons of followers, but hey, that doesn't matter to a democracy, right? The important thing now is that they've become a leader in fighting hate, he said. They've come on board. It is now time for other internet service providers to do exactly the same thing, and we call upon them to take Facebook's lead. They're not an internet service provider, but whatever, Mr. Farber. In an interview, Miss Goldy accused Facebook of bowing to pressure from Mr. Farber's organization. Accused, I think it's pretty clear, but hey. And said she was looking at her options to respond, including a lawsuit against Facebook. "I've committed no crime. I'm not part of any hate group," she said. And to label a young woman who makes YouTube videos from her kitchen table, most of which just cite things like census data, a dangerous individual, as preposterous and laughable. Airbnb and PayPal had banned Miss Goldy for public comments and social media posts expressing support for white nationalist ideas. However, she remained on Twitter on Monday with 120,000 followers. Miss Goldy and Mr. Goodrew also have YouTube channels that appeared to be active. That subtle hint ain't so subtle, is it? Twitter declined to comment on Facebook's actions or why the company had not blocked Miss Goldy from its platform. So they are contacting these places and asking, hey, why do you still have this white nationalist on here? We don't comment on future actions we may or may not take against certain users, Twitter Canada spokesperson Cam Gordon said. Last week, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey said in a fireside chat with Margaret Atwood, God, that woman must be a fucking mummy by now, in Toronto, that his company was focused on listening to its users. Our work right now is figuring out and just listening to what Twitter wants to be. What the fuck does that mean? And to understand how, now that it is more of a conversational platform, how to encourage healthy conversation. Is that what they think they've done, is made Twitter more conversational? It's kind of like how they increased democracy by getting rid of Tommy Robinson and Faith Goldy. YouTube declined to comment, so they contacted Twitter and YouTube. Asked them, hey, why is Faith Goldy still get an account on your platforms? Facebook deleted her. The government told them to. YouTube declined to comment on individual accounts, but a spokesperson for Alphabet Inc.'s Google, which owns YouTube, said the company had taken steps to reduce the spread of videos that contained controversial, religious, or supremacist content while trying to allow free speech. As long as that speech doesn't extend into right-wing politics or your opinion on the Captain Marvel movie. Google pointed to a 4-minute video Miss Goldy posted on YouTube that compared white Europeans to endangered animals and warned of population replacement by non-white immigrants in the United States. And Facebook's just playing catch-up here because Twitter's been banning these kind of hate facts for a long time. The video, Faith Goldy's video, remained active on Monday, but was covered by a disclaimer warning that it was inappropriate or offensive to some audiences. YouTube also prevented people from commenting on or sharing the video and blocked Miss Goldy from making money from ads on it. Limited state. And the Globe and Mail actually has an open comment section, and it frequently makes me rather proud of my fellow Canadians, although the responses here are a bit more mixed than I would like. The top comment here is great though. Any white person that resists our wholesale replacement and the third worldization of Canada is being nuked by the social media networks. Our elite are desperately trying to put the cat back in the bag. Let's see how it turns out. Brenton Tarrant and Robert Bowers were pushed off Twitter and Facebook and on to Gab and 8chan. These websites tell their users that the time for speech is over, and that mass casualty attacks are the only way forward. And by taking these stances, Facebook and, well, the media outlets who push on the other social media outlets to all act in unison for everybody to conspire together to give national advocates no place to advocate for their own nations. Now, if she'd been born in Mogadishu, she'd be Minister of Immigration. Talking about Faith Goldy, if she were a bit more diverse. Well, she wouldn't have been third for mayor, she would have been first, wouldn't she? I've seen far worse coming from CNN than from Faith Goldy. I found the most based and red-pilled comment in this comment section. Diversity is the racial policy of the Liberals designed to destroy the conservative white hegemony that founded, built, and traditionally ran Canada, i.e., the Canada of Stephen Leacock et al. The aim of the Liberals is to put their select master leaders in place as rulers, waited on by a servile and disjointed multicultural rabble group. They'll come for us next. Censorship never ends with just one idea or group. Yes, there is a virtually limitless supply of people willing to be offended and demand that others change their behavior. And these arguments, this argument that Facebook and Twitter, they're private companies, they can do whatever they want, well, those arguments are done. The European Union, Australia, the UK, Canada, and who knows, maybe the United States are all putting laws in place, which don't just regulate which content is legal and illegal, but legal and illegal on Facebook, on Twitter. You can say it in the privacy of your home for now. Maybe you can say it in the free speech zone. But there's certainly no place for free speech in a democracy. Just ask our Democratic Institutions Minister, Karina Gould, the youngest ever female minister. What an achievement. And not just an achievement, she's made history. And her personal life and responsibilities have overtaken her duties, according to Maclean's. Apparently shutting down Parliament and incapacitating our Prime Minister. Because, guys, it's current year.
With regards to the platforms, each of the platforms have terms of service and community standards that very clearly outline what kind of behavior is acceptable on their platforms. Facebook is enforcing their terms of service, and that is what we welcome. These are platforms where people can and should be able to share their views, and we're not saying that that should not be the case. However, in Canada, when it comes to hate speech, when it comes to inciting violence, those are things that we don't accept out on the street corner. We shouldn't accept them on platforms either.
They've taken some particularly hateful and high-profile people and groups offline, the Odin group and whatnot. We think that's progress, but again, it's inconsistent. And without any set of guidelines or rules, then we're allowing just self-regulation. We're allowing Facebook and Google to decide when and where and who. And we know with past practices on Facebook, when it comes to privacy or the spreading of hate, they've been very inconsistent and reluctant to change. The minister said in her press conference that there was more cooperation, more being done in Europe, that the social media giants were responding there, but not in Canada. And you have to ask, what's the main difference? Well, Europe has brought in a whole suite of regulations and is promising more. We're now just 6 months or so from the next election. The government chose not to bring in tough new rules for their last election bill just recently. But I think even working together and indicating to the social media groups where we might be going as Parliament right now and into the election may change the behavior that we're seeking to change with social media. They can't just simply wash their hands of this and say, allow us to self-regulate. We've just had too many incidences where hate in the virtual world turns to real violence in the real world.
When you know you're just not ready, but your hair is on point. Win.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
Real trap shit.
True patriot love. What? And all thy sons come in. Okay! With glowing hearts we see thee rise up to north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Yeah, nigga. Cash money.
God, keep our
Damn, son, where'd you find this?